and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 301, and today's date is February 27th, 2014, and the title of this episode is China Says U.S. Economy is Fake and Nothing Backs the Dollar. And we understand that China has been making deals all around the world. They've been making bilateral trades with Australia, with the UK, with Russia, with North Korea, Iran, Syria. They're down in Africa, setting up a clearinghouse for the yuan, and we see nations in Africa starting to shift their reserves from the US dollar into the yuan. So we see all of this happening, and just this week there was the G20 meeting, and certain things were said during this meeting, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in this report. But let's get started on the economic collapse news, and we're going to go out to the UK, and what we're seeing out there is that UK home ownership rates have completely fallen. The official figures show that home ownership rates in Britain have slipped to the lowest percentage in 25 years. The percentage of people who claim housing benefits and want to live in social housing sectors has risen from 59 to 66%. And what we're seeing here is that the dream of a stable home is drifting further out of reach for almost everyone in the UK. The Department for Communities and Local Government also warned that rents are increasing faster than average wages, and the number of homes built has fallen to their lowest levels in peacetime since 1920. And again, we are seeing this happen in many countries where prices are going up, salaries are going down, many people cannot find work, and it's getting difficult to survive. And in my past reports, I discussed how the people in the UK were dipping into their savings to make ends meet, going for payday loans to pay for their rent, and we're seeing this happen all throughout Europe. We're seeing it in the UK, we're seeing it in the United States, and it is spreading all over the world. And it is not getting better, it is actually getting worse. And if you really look around, most of the countries are in a recession slash depression at this time. I mean, if you really think about it, unemployment in some of these countries are around 25, 30, 35%, which is a lot more than the actual depression unemployment. So we're way above that at this point. Even in the U.S., they are looking at unemployment around 30 to 37%. Of course, it all depends on which calculation you go with. If you go with Shadow Stats, which is shadowstats.com, we are approaching the 30% mark of unemployment. If you go with this Wall Street exec who figured out the unemployment, he's saying it's very close to 37%. But we are way up there. But again, you do not see these people standing on bread lines. You don't see them in public. They're taking the homeless people, pushing them away. You need permits like in South Carolina to feed the homeless now, and it is absolutely getting ridiculous because they don't want anyone to see any of this. And they're putting everyone on food stamps, so this way you don't see the soup lines and the bread lines and things like that. But we have a lot of people today that are struggling, and they're trying to make ends meet, and it's getting more and more difficult as time goes on. And what we're seeing right now is that the initial claims for the past week in the U.S. jumped by 14,000 to 348,000, the highest weekly number in all of 2014, and the biggest miss of expectations of 335,000 in a month. So again, they're going to, manipulate. They're going to, help the data here, and most likely you'll probably see the unemployment rate go down. And how can that be? Again, all these numbers are a complete illusion. They're fake. The economy is not what it seems. Yes, the stock market's rising. The S&P, the Dow, they're all going up. NASDAQ, because they want all eyes on the stock market. Don't look at what's going on in the real economy. You just keep looking at that stock market, and that is the indicator of how the economy is doing. And we know that's completely false. We know it's fake. We know it's not real, that the real economy is not doing well. And again, I talk about layoffs a lot. And right now, Best Buy is laying off around 2,000 managers. They're just letting them go. Qantas, internationally, they're laying off 5,000 employees. Cox Communications in San Diego, 500 people in San Diego are being let go. General Dynamics, Lynn Haven, Florida, 730 people. Sony is closing 20 of its 31 U.S. retail stores. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. When an economy is booming and doing well, you don't see a retailer closing 20 of its 31 stores. The only reason you see this is because people are not buying the products and they're laying off 1,000 workers. So now we have all of these people being laid off and there's nowhere for them to go because more and more retailers will be laying off and more companies will be laying off, and we've been seeing this since the start of 2014, and it's only February. That's it. And I talk about this a lot. I talk about the real estate back in September, in October, in November, Wells Fargo, Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, they were laying off people in their mortgage departments. Not 100, not 200, thousands, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 people because they realize the housing market is dead. There are no Americans that can take out mortgages to pay for the amount of homes that are on the market. It can't be done. And right now what you're seeing is Wells Fargo is cutting more people in the mortgage departments, about another 700 people. Last year, they laid off 5,300 in the mortgage departments. So you can see what is happening. They already understand what is happening. They already know that this housing market was a complete fabrication. They realize it cannot be sustained. So what they're doing is they're trimming all the fat off of their in their company, and they're getting rid of the people because they realize that mortgage applications are completely down the tubes, and we don't need all these people. Again, if the housing market was really booming and really pushing the limits of recovery, we would see mortgage departments expand because more people need mortgages. More people are taking out loans. You wouldn't see them contract. It makes no sense whatsoever. But here we are. This is what we're seeing. And right now, and I've said this many times, the smart money is now leaving the housing market. And what I mean by that is the investment hedge fund companies that bought all of these properties and they were trying to rent them out to Americans. They were holding on to them, hoping to drive the prices up, and when the time was right, they were going to sell them to American people who are the youth of America. Of course, those boomerang buyers, which I can't even believe they're actually trying to convince us of, and they were hoping that they would be able to unload these homes at higher prices and make nice profits. And basically these are flippers, and long-term flippers, I should say. And right now what we're seeing is purchases by large institutional investors plunged in January from a year ago, according to RealtyTracks. And what we're seeing in Jacksonville, Florida, 20% decrease. Tampa, 48% decrease. Tucson, 59% decrease. Memphis, 64% decrease. Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Florida, 70% decrease because they're all leaving the market. Institutional purchases hit the skids in over 3/4 of the 101 metro areas that RealtyTrack analyzed. Their share dropping to 5.2% overall from 7.9% in December and from 8.2% in January of 2013. And we can see they are completely getting out of the market, and they are trying to get rid of all of these properties as fast as they possibly can because they realize this housing market cannot be sustained. And this is why you see mortgage applications plunging. This is why you see new home builders. The foot traffic is slowing. This is why you see Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, all these mortgage companies and mortgage departments laying off thousands upon thousands of people because the housing market is about to collapse. And many have anticipated that the large institutional investors backed by private equity would start winding down their purchases of homes to rent, and the January sales numbers provide early evidence this is happening. And this is coming from RealtyTrack Vice President Darren Bloomquist. And again, we see it. And the big question is, who's going to buy all these properties? And what we're going to see is that nobody's going to buy them. And this is why you see foreclosures surging in New York, New Jersey, California, because again, people have purchased these houses at higher prices. They're getting laid off from their job. I mean, it's a repeat of 2008. Here we are again. It's the same exact thing that is happening, and it's happening right in front of our eyes. We see it. We know what's going on. For those people who bought houses and trying to flip them, you better unload them really fast, because pretty soon you are going to be stuck with these homes. Now, as the title says, China says U.S. economy is fake and nothing backs the dollar. And, China really let the U.S. have it at the G20 meeting. And the U.S. was complaining to China about all sorts of financial misdoings. The U.S. accuses China of having financial problems and putting the global economy at risk. And they were going on and on and on and complaining. And finally, the representatives from China stood up and they said to the U.S. representatives, and what they said was that the U.S. economy and the printing press of the Federal Reserve is what you are doing. You are just printing money. And they said that the U.S. was living off printed money, and the U.S. economy was fake, and there was nothing really backing the prosperity of the U.S. You have no manufacturing, you have no economy, and pretty much the U.S. economy will collapse. And we can see what is happening. The rest of the world understands, and they know the United States is in trouble. They see what's going on. The only people that don't know are the people living in the United States who haven't woken up, who are still sleeping, who are still going about their daily routines, going to work, coming home, thinking everything's fine, until one day when they wake up and they realize, what just happened here? I just lost all my money. Why can't I get into my bank account? What is this thing called bail-ins? I don't understand this. They won't understand this, just like the people in Cyprus didn't understand it until it was too late. But the rest of the world understands what is happening. They understand the dollar is imploding. The dollar is collapsing. China fully understands what it's doing by making deals all across the globe with bilateral trade, setting up the yuan to be the next reserve currency. The United States representatives, and I mean the government officials, the central bankers, they know what's going on. That's why we have the pivot to Asia. This is why you see the movement of military assets all across the world. This is why you see the central bankers moving into the Ukraine, moving into the Middle East and trying to keep control there, moving to Africa and trying to keep control there, into Thailand, into Tunisia. This is why you're seeing this, because they understand they will not be able to keep the U.S. dollar propped up for much longer, and they need to get the war started. Now, the question is, will the economy collapse before they get the war started, or will they be able to get that war started before the economy actually collapses? And that's what they really want to do, because they do not want to be holding all the purse strings here when the entire thing comes crumbling down, because they do not want to be blamed for this whatsoever. They rather blame this on another country, because they think in their minds, and they truly believe, when this next war is over, they are going to reset the entire system, start from scratch again, and enslave the people to the central bank. And they really, truly believe this, but this time they're going to do it a little differently. They are going to get rid of the Constitution. They're going to have it the way they want it, and this is what they've been striving for. Now, in Washington right now, witnesses warn House panel that U.S. is in a constitutional crisis. And multiple witnesses told the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday that Congress is in danger of ceding all of its powers to the presidency if it continues on the path it is on. We are in the midst of a constitutional crisis with sweeping implications for our system of government, constitutional lawyer Jonathan Turley told the committee. For Congress not to act borders on self self-loathing. And what we are seeing here is the president, of course, during his State of the Union speech said, I have a pen, I have a paper, and I will create these executive orders. I don't care what Congress thinks or what Congress does. Whatever I say goes. And they're out there right now saying, listen, Congress, if you don't do something, you will lose complete control of everything. The Constitution will go down the tubes, and we will have one person giving orders to everyone. And we see this happening right in front of our faces. So you better do something right now. And this is why this is going on. And we understand that the government has its hands in everything. They're trying to control everything. They control the creation of money. Again, these are the central bankers. They control the corporate media. They tell the media what to say. This is why they wanted to put people in the newsrooms to even control it further. They want to control the internet. And the only way they can control the internet was to pretty much have what is called trolls troll around the internet, get onto alternative media sites, social sites, and have them try to discredit the people that were those people that were talking. And every time you see these trolls on these sites, it just proves one thing. If they're trying to discredit these people, that means they're hitting the points, and they are hitting a home run, and the government is very disturbed about what they're saying, because what they're saying is the truth of what is really going on. And this is why they have those trolls. They actually pay them to do this. They actually tell them to do this. And again, this has come out from the leaked documents from Edward Snowden. And there's two main objectives to all of this. One, to inject all sorts of false material onto the internet in order to destroy the reputation of its targets. Number two, the use of social sciences and other techniques to discredit those people online and to discredit activism to generate outcomes it considers desirable. And the following list of internet infiltration techniques is as follows. Infiltration operation, ruse operation, set piece operation, false flag operation, false rescue operation, disruption operation, and a sting operation. And again, yes, these trolls or shills are completely real. You can see them all over the place. Whatever the person is saying in the new media or alternative media, those people always come up with no facts or anything, and they can completely always hammer home the opposite of what the person is saying, and they use curse words, they use other types of techniques to make people believe that the person who is speaking on the news media or on the alternative media is completely phony, fake. They try to discredit him or her, and this is what they try to do. And again, in many cases, all of these are just people who are paid to do this, so people come to the site, they look at it, they see what they're saying, and they say, oh, maybe this person isn't right, maybe, and this is what they're trying to do. And again, this just proves that the government is trying to take control of the internet. Now, in my other reports, I said the NSA and all the other spy agencies around the world, they are spying on every single person. They're spying on people, the everyday person. They're spying on government officials. They're spying on government officials in other countries. And they're doing this for a couple of reasons. One, to track the American people, to create lists, to create social profiles, to understand your movements about and where you are, because they understand when the collapse come, they're going to refer to their list, come and get those people and either execute them right on the spot or bring them to a certain area where they won't cause any more problems. The other reason is to blackmail. They use it to blackmail people. And right now, again, proof that Snowden documents have shown that British and American spy agencies gather and store many millions of images from Yahoo webcam streams, and that a large percentage are naked or pornographic images. And they use this to blackmail Supreme Court judges. They use it to blackmail government officials, to allow them to push their agenda forward. It's almost like Obamacare, the Supreme Court justice saying, no, this is not constitutional, you can't have a tax on it. And all of a sudden, that same judge one day said, you know what? I'll pass it. It is constitutional. And that judge disappeared for about 2 weeks. He just left the country and didn't want anyone. He didn't want to talk to the news reporters or anything, because what really happened was he was blackmailed. And again, all these cases that you're seeing right now from the Supreme Court that are being overturned, you could say they're probably most likely blackmailed because they're trying to push their agenda. Just like the Fourth Amendment ruling that I talked about yesterday, all of a sudden that was overturned, and now this information is coming out that, again, they spy on these people to blackmail them into pushing their agenda and the decisions that they want to have made, and this is why this is being done. Okay, now we understand out in the Ukraine, the whole reason for this was to get the Ukraine on the EU system. And right now, the Ukraine is talking with the EU and IMF, and the top priority is to get the Ukraine on the EU system. Not for the people of the Ukraine, not to have to help the people of the Ukraine, but the top priority is to get the country into more debt. That's the top priority, because this is what they really wanted. And what we're seeing here is that the new Ukrainian authorities are ready to sign an association deal with the EU within 1 to 2 weeks. If the European Union insists that the agreement be signed by the President, a delay is possible until after the presidential election, but if the condition is not set, I believe the government will be prepared to sign the agreement within a week or two, and this is coming from the opposition leader. Because you have to understand, the central bankers need this to be signed. They need this to be ready to go. They need the private Western Central Bank to be set up inside the Ukraine. They need to put the country on the debt system, and this is what they are trying to do right now. But they're having a problem. Parts of the Ukraine, the south and the eastern part that border along the Black Sea, are mostly Russian. And right now, Crimea, the parliament in Crimea announced a referendum on independence. And according to the new proposal, it should be up to the Crimean people, the population, to decide whether to expand its autonomy and make choices upon its future. Kiev's new leadership has pledged to keep Ukrainian territorial integrity and warn Russia against interference in its own domestic affairs. Moscow, assuring it will not breach the sovereignty of Ukraine, has nevertheless put 150,000 combat troops on high alert at its Ukrainian border and has expressed readiness to react in case of violence. Now, of course, John Kerry heard about this, and of course the U.S. government, the central bankers, and they said, whoa, 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 whoa. John Kerry said, you know what? He said, let me call Sergei Lavrov and let's talk about what is going on. And John Kerry has said to Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov during a telephone conversation he favors a dialogue between Russia and the U.S. in order to stabilize the situation in the Ukraine. Kerry expressed his willingness to cooperate in order to stabilize the situation in the Ukraine. Russia representatives emphasized the importance of fulfilling current agreements, which, again, the opposition, the paid opposition from the U.S. government and the EU, they went back on the agreement. First of all, it concerns the Ukraine's peace deal signed on February 21st. The deal was signed by the Ukrainian president, the opposition, notarized by the foreign ministries of France, Germany, and Poland, and approved by the U.S. And as soon as that was signed, I think it was like 24 hours later, all hell broke loose, and the president of the Ukraine had to escape. The opposition took over, and this deal fell by the wayside. And the Russians are saying, we had a signed deal, you approved it, and all of this went to pot. And we can see what is happening because they're running out of time and they need this on the EU system to spread the debt. But what they're worried about is that the south and eastern part of the Ukraine, which is the production and the strategic location which they really wanted, they can't have that part break off because then they'll be left with the West, and the West just has debt and there is really no production there, and they really don't want it. They want the entire Ukraine. And of course, they're going after Georgia next, but we're seeing what is happening right now. Now, Russia understands what's happening. They understand the tactics the central bankers use. They understand what is going on, and they are sending two Russian warships. The Russian warships have entered the Black Sea, and they are sitting outside and moving into the port near Crimea because they understand what is going in. They also sent a intelligence ship to Cuba. And this intelligence ship has electronic eavesdropping equipment and weaponry. And this is, again, in Cuba, where they're eavesdropping on the United States. So we can see what is happening. They have two ships in the Black Sea, and they have an intelligence ship in Cuba. They are getting prepared. They are getting ready just in case something else happens, because they understand that the central bankers are not going to be satisfied if the Ukraine breaks into two. Okay, now, in respects to China, China is making some moves. Now, we understand that two nations, I think it was Zimbabwe, was starting to change up their reserves, remove some of the U.S. dollars, take on yuan, because we understand that in Kenya they're becoming the clearinghouse for the yuan in Africa. And right now what's happening is China is planning an air base in Zimbabwe. They're going to set up the first Chinese military air base in Africa, and this comes amid increasing bilateral cooperation between Zimbabwe and China. And basically what's happening is China is positioning itself for future, you could say, gunboat diplomacy, where its military presence will give it a bargaining power against superpowers like the U.S. So now they are positioning themselves and creating bases and moving their military assets into Africa, because we understand what is happening. Each one of these countries are getting prepared for war. This is why you see the pivot to Asia and the United States and all the other private Western central bank countries moving their military assets. Now we see China moving its military assets and moving them into Africa. Now, China has also signed a security and defense agreement with Djibouti. Now, Djibouti has offered military facilities such as a home to the port to the Chinese Navy. Now, where is Djibouti? That is in the opposite side of Yemen, and this is in the Red Sea, and it's right by the Gulf of Aden, and it's like the choke point that leads in and out of the Red Sea. So we can see we have the Chinese on one side and the U.S. on the other side in Yemen. And again, they are moving their military assets, signing agreements, and getting everything prepared for World War III. And this is why this is happening. So what do we have here? We have Russia branching out to set up military bases around the world. We have China now setting up military bases in Africa and in other parts of the world. We have China making agreements with all the countries around the world to become so the yuan can become the next reserve currency. We have the U.S. and Europe and NATO all positioning their military assets all around the world. The pivot to Asia, the missile shield in Europe, the missiles in Guam, the new base in Japan, and we can see all this taking shape because we have to understand that the central bankers realize, again, I've said this so many times, that the dollar is collapsing. And they need to get the war started. And again, they're trying to get into Iran. They're trying to get into Syria. And right now, they're using the peace talks of their nuclear reactors. And again, this is an illusion because the IMF and the other central bankers are trying to infiltrate their banks and try to get their natural resources on the U.S. dollar. And this is why the president is out there saying, no, even though we remove some of the sanctions and ease them, you cannot do business with Iran yet, because if they do, we will not be getting a cut of this, and you will not be using the U.S. dollar to purchase the oil and other natural resources. So you cannot do this yet, and anyone who tries, we're going to come down hard on these people. And right now, Kerry is saying we must pursue Iran nuke talks before we considering war. The United States has an obligation to pursue nuclear negotiations with Iran before it considers going to war with Tehran to force it to give up its nuclear activities. And again, the military action likely if Iran talks fail. This is coming from a U.S. spokeswoman. And again, all these options are still on the table. Again, the Senate is trying to come up with new sanctions on Iran. They have a new bill that is created because, again, they are getting prepared and they're getting ready if these talks don't go forth. And we can see that they probably will not. Iran has been saying in the past they don't believe anything's going to happen with these talks. And again, the U.S. is continually adding more and more things to the P5+1 deal that had nothing to do with it. And again, they're probably going to make Iran say, you know what, this is getting out of hand already. You're asking for a lot more than we agreed on, so we're backing out. And of course, the U.S. is going to come out there and say, listen, see, they backed out. They didn't want to do it. So now we have only one alternative, a military strike. And we can see how this is all forming at this point. Now, in the past reports, I've been saying that they want to push some type of cyber legislation, and this is why we've been seeing the buildup of cyber attacks at this point. And right now, officials are pushing for some type of cyber legislation. Cyber attacks are growing and threats from adversaries will continue to evolve. The commander of the U.S. Cyber Command, General Keith Alexander, told the Senate Armed Services Committee on February 27th, those attacks are coming and we are not ready for them, he said. Everyone knows we need significant cyber legislation. Now, all of a sudden, we've been having this ramp up of cyber attacks against Target, Neiman Marcus, Adobe, on the University of Maryland. The Syrian Electronic Army has been hitting other news agencies and Microsoft. And now, all of a sudden, they are pushing hard for cyber legislation. And right now, it goes on to say that everyone knows we need significant cyber legislation. This is coming from Senator John McCain. And again, he added that the country is in grave danger of engaging in a new form of warfare that most don't understand. Now, Panetta is out there, and he's warning of a cyber attack. He's saying that Al-Qaeda remains a menace, growing in places like Somalia and Yemen. The nuclear ambitions of North Korea and Iran support global terrorism are continuing dangers. The chaos in Syria represent risk. Russia is worrisome. But the greatest threat to security in the 21st century comes from the cyber attacks, former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said Wednesday. We have to be vigilant. We have to be prepared. There are a lot of threats out there, he said. Panetta said industrial espionage is just the start of the problem of cybersecurity. The bigger worry is the development of viruses that can take down whole computer networks. They're looking at our grid. They're looking at our transportation systems. This could destroy the world. And this is what they're saying right now because they are building the propaganda for this incredible false flag that is going to happen, because we have to remember all the pieces are now starting to fit together. They tried this back in 2013. It didn't work. This time they know better. This time they are actually going to do it. And of course, Jay Johnson is out there, and again, he's the head of DHS now, and Homeland Security. Jay Johnson on Wednesday warned that the Boston Marathon bombing may be a sign of things to come as the U.S. attempts to defend itself from terrorist attacks. And he's going on to say that, these threats are harder to detect. He's also concerned about those who are self-radicalized, and also those so-called lone wolves. And we talked about this a lot. And if you haven't heard any of this and you're new to my reports, just go back a couple of reports. I talk about this a lot, about what a lone wolf is. And he went on to say, I think the terrorist threat is becoming more diffuse. And he is saying that that we need to do something at this point. And Committee Chairman Michael McCaul noted the events in Syria are now threatening to become issues for us at home. So they are building this entire propaganda up for the false flag. They're already telling us there's going to be some type of cyber attack because they're looking at our power grid. They're looking at our water treatment, and we can see they've been playing and playing this up, and we are getting very close because we have to understand the elections for Syria are coming up in mid-2014. The Fed has said they're going to be finished with the tapering by mid-2014 because they are tapering right now to show that the economy is recovering. They need to show everyone that it wasn't them. And when another country strikes the United States and the economy falls, and this is why the stock exchange, the NASDAQ, and the BAT system all have a kill switch. And again, NASDAQ is getting theirs by March 1st. So we can see the time frame and how everything is being worked out. And March 1st is the end of this week. So we can see what is happening. They are getting prepared because they understand, and they understand that the world sees that the dollar, because the dollar is imploding on itself. I mean, you can see that China is out there, and they stood up right in front of the United States and said, listen, we know you're collapsing. We know. And this is why everyone has been positioning all their military assets all around the world. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.